Who are Washington's must-get recruits in 2026?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff, no Lars Hanson today, so it's just me. You know me. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We got a really fun show coming at all of you today. We're talking about basketball's young core. It was a really unfortunate loss to Rutgers in overtime on Wednesday night. We're going to get there, talk about some of the positives from that game, because there might be more than you think, honestly. We're going to talk about Washington's commitment to the run game and how that impacts the recruiting trail in 2026. A couple of really interesting things going along over there. And we're also going to get into the must-get recruits from this class. One quick caveat, as we like to challenge ourselves a little bit here on this program, when we do exercises like this, I did not include Derek Coleman-Bruce on this list. I know, number one player in the state of Washington, four-star edge rusher. He is far and away the number one prospect on Washington's board. We all know this. You know, Ohio State's in the mix, Oregon's in the mix. We're going to see how that all shapes up. But there are a bunch of other guys that I wanted to make sure that we talked about in this class. And honestly, I don't think there are any other players that are more important than Brady Smigiel, quarterback from Newberry Park High School in Southern California. I love everything about this kid's film. Talent is truly unbelievable. He's not I was going to say the number one uncommitted quarterback in this class, but it's not. That's Ryder Lyons from Folsom High School, UW Pipeline, as we know. But when I watch Brady Smigiel, I think this is the kind of guy that Jedd Fisch really dreams about in terms of what he wants in a quarterback. And that's no slight to Davon Williams. Davon Williams is the perfect Jedd Fisch quarterback. He's mobile. He's got great speed. Every time Jedd gets a chance, he talks about how Davon might be the fastest guy on the team. He's got phenomenal arm strength, everything. Brady has all of that, and he also happens to be 6'5", 205, 210 in that range. So when I look at what Brady brings to the table, it's not only is it the aura of, one of the top 5, top 10 quarterbacks in the country, depending on what recruiting service you're looking at, but it's the talent, the ability to run the football. I think it was 400 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns this past season on the ground, which is really impressive, a big step forward for him in that department. When you watch his film, you say, all right, this isn't somebody who, in the Damon mold, is going to run the read option a whole bunch of times a game. It's not somebody who you're going to rely on for QB power very often, QB draw, just different little things like that you can do with Damon. When Jedd Fisch was on with Brock and Salk, talking about the teams that he was watching in terms of making sure he can maximize Damon Williams, whether that be the Washington Commanders, the Baltimore Ravens, the Buffalo Bills, and the Arizona Cardinals, 4 teams you mentioned. We're probably not going to see that level of running with Brady Smigiel. You can do some different things like that, time and again, but it's not the same way because he impacts the game so much with his arm. He is one of the most talented pure passers in the country in this class. And that was obvious. Washington has been hot on his trail for a while. He commits to Florida State, obviously backs off, and then Ohio State gets in the mix. He ends up backing off of them because Chip Kelly goes to Las Vegas Raiders. So the more I look at what the situation is with Brady Smigiel, I don't want us to just sit here and call Washington the favorite because I haven't spoken to him. I'm not sure what that situation looks like at this point in time. But if Washington isn't at the very least in his top 3 right now, maybe even top 2 with where UCLA stands in his recruitment with Shane Rosenthal, one of his former high school teammates, I would be shocked because this is something that Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff have been building for that for a while. He's somebody who's going to be on campus on March 8th for UW's Junior Day. Already has an official visit set for the final weekend in June, which is a really big deal, which we've talked about on previous shows. Getting that final visit is always crucial. But that's just a guy, I think, when I look at the hierarchy of this class, getting a quarterback is always vital, right? It's what football is. You need to have a good quarterback in order to succeed. And in terms of the guys Washington is in on, there's nobody out there more important than Brady Smigiel. Another guy I want to get to in that similar mold where he's the number one player on their board at the position is 4-star offensive lineman Esun Tafa. I didn't want to spend too long on him because when I look at Esun Tafa, we all know the situation. He committed to Washington back in November, backs off unsurprisingly after Brennan Carroll decides to leave for the Las Vegas Raiders. But he said Washington is still in the mix very heavily. You look at what his official visits are right now. It's Washington, it's USC, it's Utah. So UW is still right there among his top schools, among his finalists. And from everything I've heard about Michael Switzer on the recruiting trail, He is a really strong recruiter who played big roles in helping get some guys in the 2025 class. So I really like where Washington sits with him right now, because he didn't rule them out immediately after decommitting and said, but my main reason for decommitting was Brennan Carroll. He had a strong relationship with him, and you can't fault a kid for that anytime they do. So the fact that UW is still in the mix is really, really important. The names I really wanted to spend, I combined these two in one since they're high school teammates, is the O'Day edge rushers. That's F.A. Siale and David Schwerzel. I love what these guys bring to the table. And I was having this conversation with Lars off air the other day, where when I look at what the situation is with Derek Coleman-Brusa, where it's going to be a really tough battle to get a kid like that in the boat because of what he brings on the field and how hot Ohio State is on his trail, how hot Oregon is on his trail. It's not going to be easy. And when we looked at it, we said, yeah, F.A. Siale and David Schwerzel are great consolation prizes. I don't think Washington fans would be happy in a world without Derek Coleman-Brusa, and I think that's understandable. That's not the road I want to go down today. But we talked about it in terms of would UW fans be happy without him? And I said, no, but they should be. Because when you look at what both these guys bring to the table, they are big, physical. They're almost listed the same size practically. They're both 6'4", 250, 255, somewhere in that range. And when you turn on the film and you watch what these guys bring from a physicality perspective, it's so much fun to watch. And it's exactly what you want. It's because it's what we didn't see last season in the Big Ten. In the first season of the Big Ten, we saw what that adjustment looked like. When I sat there and watched the Sun Bowl, watch Jacob Bandis and all these guys get blown off the ball, I didn't blame them because they played so long in Pac-12. There's only so many things you could do. The rotation of the position was not great, but you just didn't see the physicality that you wanted to, and that showed over the second half of the season. From about that Iowa game on, we saw just really big physical run games impose their will on Washington's defensive line. Now, the coaching staff did a really good job going out, upgrading in the transfer portal with Simone Pepa, Ontario Thompson, Tatayu Iungalole, but you want to make sure that you have those guys developing in your program as well. And having guys so close to home in David Schwerzel, in F.A. Siale is really, really important. And everything they bring to the table is just, it's just exactly what you need, where if one of those guys shifts inside full-time due to their size, I wouldn't be surprised. I think that might be a solid move in the long run, depending on how the interior recruiting works out in terms of this class, where it's going to be difficult to pull in as Sabote Katawango is the top interior defensive lineman on the West Coast. We'll see what happens with Bot Mulitalo. That's another guy I really like, and I wanted to make sure I threw into this conversation as well. But two more guys I want to get to. First one, let's stick along the defensive line here. That's Anthony Jones from Crean Lutheran High School in Southern California, 4-star edge rusher, who appears to be down to UW in Tennessee for the most part, where he told 247 Sports after taking a visit to Tennessee that they were his number one school at the moment. Those things can change. He's going to come up on March 8th for an unofficial visit during junior day, probably going to be back for an official as well. So that's a situation I want to monitor. But when I look at, I don't want to say game-wrecking edge rusher, because I think he's just a little bit behind where Derek Coleman-Brusa is right now, just in terms of the physicality and the motor that he plays with, because Derek Coleman-Brusa is just out of this world in that department. But when I watch Anthony Jones, I see everything that Isaiah Ward brings to the table and Russell Davis, where he fits really, really well in that mold. And I think that this is somebody that Jason Kafusi, that Aaron Van Horn, that this coaching staff would love to have, would love to build a defensive line room around, where you want as many of those quality bodies that you can rotate in and out as often as possible. We've seen what that looks like around college football. We saw it with Ohio State this past season. We saw it with Michigan in the national championship game. Those big, talented, quality defensive lines are what really win you games, and getting somebody like Anthony Jones in the boat would be huge in taking a step in that direction. Last guy, another one who I didn't want to spend too long on, because we know what the situation is, where it's going to be very, very tough to pull him in. Somebody who I wanted to emphasize John Richardson's commitment to building a really, really strong secondary, and that's Davon Benjamin down at Oaks Christian. Top 50 prospect in this class who plays safety for them right now, might end up switching to cornerback at the next level. So he's somebody where the more I watch his film, the more I say, man, he could really be a shutdown corner. And whether it be in the nickel, on the outside, he's got the size, the physicality, the ball skills to be one of the better, more productive corners in the country, and in a room that right now has Tacario Davis, has Deficien's Prysock leaving after this year. And then you look at what it could be going forward with somebody like Dylan Robinson anchoring the room. Putting somebody like Davon Benjamin across from him is a really strong building block, and you start to see what that 2023 secondary looked like at Arizona, which is obviously what we're going to see this year here at Washington. So a lot to like there, a lot to like about Davon Benjamin, who I love the production. I love the fact that his coaching staff plays him at safety just to keep him around the football. So that's going to be a really tough battle to win out. But I think that building a strong secondary is absolutely vital. And I think he might be my favorite player to watch on film, just in terms of the secondary players in this class. But we're going to stick with the recruiting theme here because we got to talk about Washington's commitment to the run. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, and the game tips off. The NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's dive into this. This is something I'm really, really interested in, where I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of weeks, where Washington grabbed a commitment from Ansu Sanoe really early in the process, which was a great commitment to land at the time. He's obviously dropped a little in 247 Sports' rankings since then, where he's the number one player in Oregon, top 100 player overall, still a four-star prospect, still a fantastic commitment to land. When you look at his film, you just see a big physical running back who thrives between the tackles. And while he's probably close to what his ceiling might be as a runner at the college level, where it's not like he's all of a sudden going to drop, a full 10th of a second off his 40 time or anything like that. I mean that with no disrespect intended. It's just his skill set is very clear cut and obvious. For anybody out there who doesn't watch a whole bunch of high school film when kids commit, or maybe they wait until they sign, different things like that. When you watch somebody like Ansu Sanoe, who committed after his sophomore year, it's very early tape, but you look at his size, you see big, you see physical, you see somebody who it's not, he can certainly, continue to improve with little things like his footwork, different things like that. But in terms of his running style and how he plays, that's something that's not changing just based on his frame, his size. He's like 6'2", 215. Those are things that are going to stay pretty consistent. So one thing that I love about Scottie Graham and about his approach is he likes taking two running backs in each class that really complement each other well. Lars and I have talked about the Thunder and Lightning plenty of times on this here show. And that is showing up in the biggest way possible in this recruiting class. And to be quite honest, I love it. Where on Thursday, as I'm recording this, Deshonne Redeaux, the top prospect on the West Coast for running backs, 4-star from Oaks Christian, top 100 overall, he decided to cut down his list to 6. Washington's in that top 6, which I found really interesting because Washington's also in the top 10 and will be hosting 4-star running back Brian Bonner from Valencia High School, also in Southern California, for their junior day on March 8th. I look at this pair of prospects, and I feel like Lars and I said this after Ansu Sanoe committed. I said, you have your running back. If you want to take another one, you can take another one. Great. But Scottie Graham has really come into this class with a commitment to amping things up a lot. And I don't know how much it might have to do with the fact that you want someone to pair with Demond Williams, or how much it has to do with the fact that, hey, these Big Ten teams, they have these running backs who really establish a physicality, which is obviously Jedd Fisch wants to do a little bit more with the offensive line, which I'm really curious to see how that's going to work out in spring practice and moving forward. But having a true threat at any given time from the backfield is something that obviously we've seen at Washington past, right? Whether it be Savon Ahmed, Myles Gaskin. I go off recent memory here because I'm 27. I'm sorry to all the older everydayers who watched Corey Dillon, who watched Napoleon Kaufman. I unfortunately was not alive for that. So I can't really go down that road very often. But when I look at what Washington's running back room could be moving forward, if they're able to secure the commitment from, let's just for the moment right now, say Deshonne Redeaux. I feel like they might have a little bit of a better shot with Brian Bonner at this point in time. I wouldn't be surprised if Deshonne ends up picking USC, but I look at these guys and I say, let's say if they pick Deshonne, that's a guy who goes 10.42 right now in the 100-meter dash. That is elite speed. It's not Jordan Washington, who is just out of this world John Ross level fast, but it's really, really close to it. So I say, all right, that's a guy who he certainly can be an every down back where he's listed 5'11", 195 right now. I love the way he's able to make guys miss in tight areas. I think he's a really, really talented 3-down back. I hate going with the NFL player comparisons, but I love going with them more for play style than it is, just actual high-end ceiling, because Deshonne's is a little unfair. 247 gave him Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, top 15 pick, should be all pro, the Detroit Lions. I love watching Jahmyr Gibbs. He's one of my favorite running backs to watch in the NFL. And I certainly agree and understand where it comes from. I don't like throwing that kind of a label on a player, but I see it. And I think in this offense, the reason I say all that is because we know what Washington's running backs room looks like, both short and long-term, to be honest. But you're always looking to improve. You're looking to stack classes. That's one of the biggest points of recruiting. It's finding ways to really continue to level up and upgrade year in and year out, which is something we saw Washington do really, really well in 2018, 2019, 2020, which is obviously what built the foundation for the national championship run that the Huskies went on in 2023. So I see that at running back I see that vision, from Scottie Graham. I see what that vision is when I look at it and I say, okay, yeah, you're really swinging for the fences here, because you could very easily just say, hey, yeah, we got Ansu Sanoe. That's an awesome commitment. He had offers to Georgia. He had offers from a whole bunch of big time programs around the country, and he chose us really early in the process. That's a solid win. Awesome. You can, just, hey, we're going to move on to 2027. There's a guy who I really love, Honor Falave Johnson, who we're going to get to him next year. Like that's something we don't need to talk about right now because we're focusing on the 2026 class. But if you're able to get one of Deshonne or Brian Bonner, this room all of a sudden could become one of the best in the Big Ten for the foreseeable future. Because we look at 2026, or excuse me, let's start with 2025. I don't want to really jump ahead of myself because we know what that is, right? Where we have Jonah Coleman, who is going to take the brunt of the carries again. Lars and I talked about on yesterday's show. Will it be an increase from last year, where it's 190 something? Probably not. I think in terms of efficiency and keeping him fresh, and the way he got dinged up here and there over the course of the season this year, something where Jedd Fisch wants to keep him fresh because he also has the bodies behind him to be able to do that. Where you think about Adam Muhammad, he was the reason I wanted to jump ahead because I'm so excited about what his potential is. Where you look at him, he's got so much wiggle for the position, and he's big, he's physical, he's got that Ansu Sanoe size, but he looks like he brings top end speed to the table as well. But you can't say that because he came in a class with Jordan Washington, who's higher rated thanks to the elite numbers that he puts up on the track and everything like that. Obviously, we didn't see much of him last year, but when I look at what this position can be, where that's going to be the three of this season, we know that. Scottie Graham said as much, where when he was asked about Jonah Coleman and Adam Muhammad, the first thing out of his mouth was, hey, don't forget about Jordan Washington. That guy's going to help us out a lot this season. So whether that be on special teams where he could be a great kick or punt returner, or, out of the backfield in a Savon Ahmed type role, or if you just want to line him up next to Damon Williams, run the read option, do a lot of different things, it's going to be really, really interesting. And again, I feel like I'm getting off track here, but because I wanted to make most of this about recruiting, but the reason I want to bring all those guys up is you're stacking classes, where you bring in Julian McMahon and Quade Carr, who are two promising guys where you don't need to play them right away. And you have some time to let them develop and let them grow into, because they both have very high ceilings, but there was a reason they were a little bit more underrated. It's because they still have little things that they can work on. You don't see that on Brian Bonner's tape. You don't see that on Deshonne Redeaux's tape. So when I look at what 2026 could be behind Adam Muhammad, behind Jordan Washington, I feel like one or both of those guys, whichever one might end up at Washington in this hypothetical world we're living in for the next couple of minutes, one of those guys could overtake Jordan Washington. And I mean that as no slight to the talent of Jordan Washington, because he is a really exciting playmaker who, if we look up in, 3-4 seasons, whenever his UW career is finished, and he's somebody who was really productive and, averaged 7-8 yards a touch, I don't think anybody would be surprised because of the skill set that he has. I think that's just more a testament to what kind of talents both Deshonne Redeaux and Brian Bonner bring to the table are. And that's something where the more I watch that, the more I watch their tape, I say, okay, I see what Scottie Graham's vision is here. And, we look at, I referenced Ohio State a couple of minutes ago. We look at Ohio State, where this season it was Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. That was the best running back group in the country. Now, it's awesome when you have an Ashton Jeanty type or a Caleb Johnson type or a Kyle Monangai, but even look at Rutgers if I want to bring up the Kyle Monangai example, I can talk about Samuel Brown, who was just as impressive. We saw what that looked like in that game at the end of September. So having a strong combination of running backs is great in this conference, as us West Coast football fans have learned, where it's throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball. And hey, I love that. I'm never going to knock that at all. But I think that's really interesting to see what Scottie Graham and what Jedd Fisch and this commitment to the run is going to be moving forward, because when you have Damon Williams in the backfield, I hate using the term dual threat, because everybody in this day and age is a dual threat quarterback, but Damon Williams is the epitome of that now. He's the epitome of that in this point in time, because he has that 4.3 speed that Jedd Fisch will laud every chance he gets. And combining that with Jonah Coleman this year, Adam Muhammad this year, Jordan Washington this year, and then whoever else it might be next year, whether it be Adam, Jordan, if you're able to get one of these top 100 guys, it just continues to level it up. And as you continue to try to build up the offensive line, you bring in 5 freshman receivers this past year, everything can all of a sudden complement it. Just everything else really, really well, where it was one of the things that I think was most frustrating about last season for a lot of fans is the vision was there, and there were certainly some self-inflicted wounds when you talk about some of the play calling, when you talk about some of the penalties that they committed early in the season. But I feel like a lot of those might have been a team that was 40-plus new players, that was mainly built for the spring transfer portal window, and that may have taken a little bit more of a toll than we want to give it credit for. So I'm willing to let that play out in the short term, where, again, when I look at this and I see Washington committing to these resources to getting Brian Bonner or getting Deshonne Redeaux, it shows that, okay, they understand what it's going to take to win in the Big Ten, and this talent in the backfield is certainly going to be a massive part of that. So I'm willing to let it play out. I'm willing to see where it goes, because it's really interesting. And we're spending a lot of time on young talent. Let's talk about it on the basketball side of things too. Surprise, we are now joined by Lars Hanson. Lars, great to be here. We're talking basketball. So that was a tough loss last night. 89-85 against Rutgers in overtime. First thing, I got to get this out there. Watching Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey in person was really, really impressive. Dylan Harper especially, that kid is cold-blooded. He's going to be a star at the NBA level. That was a lot of fun to watch. But something I asked Danny Sprinkle after the game was, hey, you look at it, 57 of your points came from Mekhi Mason, Tyler Harris, Zoom Diallo. Lars, what do those guys have in common?
All guards.
Yeah, but one other thing. They're coming back next year. They're all eligible to come back next year. So I look at this and I say, all right, I look at those 3 guys combined with Dominic Diamande, combined with Jace Butler taking a step forward, combined with this incoming recruiting class that's ranked number 1 in the Big Ten. That's a really, really solid young core that all of a sudden, I wrote this over on Huskies Wire. You could take a big step forward next year. People are picking you as one of the biggest sleepers in the country.
Yeah, I mean, like, the point about Dylan Harper, like right now, Washington doesn't have a Dylan Harper, but next year, when some of these guys take a next step and you get kind of more of a rounded out team, I think this is what you're kind of looking at and thinking, Niko Bundalo, you're looking at all that, like the depth of the roster next year. I think the kind of like everything being rounded out, JJ Mandiquit, Cortland Muldrew, and then you got Manny Traore. Like everything is there next season. I'm just really curious how much of a jump can Zoom take, because I think Mekhi Mason, if he can become more consistent, I think that's the thing. Because Mekhi Mason's shown a lot this season, but he hasn't shown it on a game in, game out basis. That's why you have the DJ Davis kind of going back and forth there throughout the season. And now it's Mekhi Mason's turn, but you just wish it could have come on a little bit sooner from a more consistent basis.
So I absolutely agree, where it's nice to see him come on as of late, where I was doing some math a little bit earlier. I went back and looked at the numbers as well. Tyler Harris shooting 50% three-point range this season, and Mekhi Mason is the only other one where Christian King's over 40 as well, but he's taken shots that I think would fall under kind of the qualifying range there, where Mekhi Mason is next, and he's at 40.6. So he's certainly taken a big step forward over the last couple of weeks, I want to say. And when I look at it, yeah, absolutely, you're 100% right, where you wish it came earlier, and all of a sudden maybe you're not, 4-11 in Big Ten play, right? But I look at that and I say, all right, it feels like it took him a little bit, where you can say the same for Tyler Harris, where now that he's found that consistency, that physicality, that just the defensive ability is something that Danny Sprinkle's praised him for a lot as well. Now that he's kind of found what it takes to play in the conference, you're really seeing it. It's something you've mentioned quite a few times, where Danny is building something, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
And that's the most frustrating part, because every time especially when we talked about Danny coming into the season and the team and everything, you saw what he did at Utah State, and we saw what he did at Montana State. But you kind of have to remember, Utah State was in a vacuum. Montana State was where Utah State was built at. Like it's like you can strike lightning in a bottle in a lesser conference. No offense to Danny and the Mountain West and all that, but the Mountain West and the Big Ten are not in the same conference. And so this is kind of much like what Jedd had in the football program with the learning experience. Now Danny knows how to recruit to the Big Ten. I mean, he already knew how, but I think now he's kind of picking up on some extra things that next season, when you talk about 4-11, maybe you go 11-4, maybe you flip it, maybe you go 8-6 or whatever it ends up being, whatever that breakdown ends up being, because Danny knows how to win. You got the right coach in play. He's got the right players signed to come in. The question is, how quickly can he build it all back up together next season, which I think is, again, like you mentioned, Dominic Diamante, why he didn't play this season. Like, yeah, it was good. It was a good addition. Might have been nice to get him, but when you look at it, it's like, what would you possibly have gained? And maybe Dominic makes a difference in one of these two games here, but is making the Big Ten tournament this season better for the program, or is making the NCAA tournament next year better long-term when you can make a deep run, and nobody's seen Dominic until game one?
So I certainly agree with you there. I think we're having a very different conversation about this team, about this roster, if he does come in the summer, if he's able to do that, where it's, it just kind of is what it is in terms of eligibility, different things like that. So you can't fault anybody. You can't pin any blame on like, where was he? Why wasn't he here in June? Where that's eligibility. It's a whole different conversation as this, world with international guys being able to come over and now play college basketball for playing pros. Like, it's a little different. So I feel like you can't get caught up in that hypothetical world, but it kind of makes you wonder, right? And now, because I think about that, the way I wanted to pair this together was thinking about the step we saw Zoom Diallo take last night, where he really just felt like he was getting to the rim at will, especially in the second half, where you got to clean up the turnovers. That one at the very end was something that you could see Danny Sprinkle losing on the sideline as he just kind of made a really poor pass, to say the least. But when you pair the highs with what at this point in time are still freshman mistakes, that's not a mistake he's going to make at this point next year, where Danny said, I probably shouldn't have had a freshman taking the ball out in that scenario. But you combine what those two guys can be with slashing to the basket, which is something we've seen this team have a lot of trouble with at times, at different points in the season, especially, when the floor is not spaced out really well. I'm really excited about the future for all that.
Oh yeah, and I think that's why we were excited about Danny and still are. I think if Zoom like that, that's why I remember the conversation we had going into the season about Zoom was, he's got all the talent in the world, but I think just he's gonna make too many freshman mistakes, which was fine because he's going to come back for at least another year, if not 2 more years. And you can see that growth as long as he's able to kind of shed some of those issues. Because you look at the box score, like team turnovers wasn't necessarily an issue, and when you compare like
the referee was that we don't want to go down that road.
We can do an entire show on that if you want. Yeah. But with that being said, it's just like, there's certain control what you can control. Play within yourself, play a little more honed, play a little more, maybe under control, and some of those turnovers go away. And I think Zoom will be one of those guys that we're talking about. That offseason jump is going to be massive. Now, how many other guys can make that jump with him? Can Jace Butler make a jump? How much can JJ Mandiquit and Matty Troyore and not Matty Troyore, Cortland Muldrew, make that kind of jump coming in? Because it's one thing to get high impact freshmen, but as we saw this season, Jace has played a handful of games, and obviously Zoom has emerged as a starter, but he's not necessarily been able to be consistent because of the turnover. So if you can get those freshmen going early, like that's the key, because if it takes those guys a little bit longer, now we're looking into, again, November, December, January of next season before the team really starts hitting its stride, which is fine, but then it just kind of makes the conference play even more impetus.
So one name that you mentioned that I think is probably the best way to kind of wrap this up is I think we should talk about JJ Mandiquit, where Niko Bundalo, obviously the headliner of the class, the big get, the highest ranked, whatever you want to say. He absolutely is going to live up to all those things. Or, he's, I don't want to put that kind of expectation on him, but you know what I mean when I say that. But when I look at JJ Mandiquit, I think he's kind of the glue that ties not only this class together, but he's the kind of guy that can tie this team together, where he's not the shooter right now that the reference I want to make, because Danny Sprinkle called him best point guard in the country, is Braden Smith at Purdue. Where when we saw him come in here, the way he was able to run the floor and get everybody organized, that's what you see from JJ Mandiquit. And that's what you don't really see from this team right now from the point guard position. And it's because you have a lot of true freshmen who are still learning the system. And as we've referenced a couple of times, Danny told us early in the year, it was taking some of them a little bit longer than he would like to get acclimated. And from when you watch JJ Mandiquit, that's just not an issue that you see. He's somebody who already knows how to run an offense, because we see great doing it. We see, like, when for anybody who's gone to a game this season, if you watch when Gray Osobor is just on the offensive end of the floor, he's not just active in terms of trying to get the ball in the post, trying to do everything, but he is telling people where they need to be. He's calling screens for the guys. He's making sure everybody's in the right spot at the right time. And while it's very helpful and it's worked at times, that's something you want your point guard doing. And it just feels like that's one of the biggest reasons that Danny prioritized JJ, is because that's what he does best.
But it's also why you still want to bring Gray in and have him teach those things to Zoom and Mekhi and everybody else, so that they can pass those down to the young freshmen coming in next year. Because Gray's not coming back next year. So this was kind of like, if you're going to use Gray as a foundation board, everybody else around him has to soak up the information. And I think that's what we're going to start to see, is how much can Zoom and the other guys glean off of Gray and what he was able to do and explain things, and how much can you just grow naturally as a player.
No, absolutely. I really like where you're going with that. But Lars, we're going to get out of here for today. Thank you as always for being here. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.